Thanks everyone for having me. Really excited to talk about extending data wrapper tooltips with Svelte. Uh, this has been a joy of mine to put together. I'll go through the content relatively quickly. I'll have time for questions at the end. I'll introduce the project and what the Urban Institute is. I'll talk about chart interaction events. I'll talk about Svelte, as well as the basics of sending data wrapper events to Svelte, along with some closing thoughts and even a template repository for you to check out at the end. Great. So the Urban Institute, like Gregor said, is a policy research institute in Washington, D.C. We have over 700 employees, tons of researchers looking at policy areas from health to economics, tax, racial justice, really tons of different areas. And our data visualization team builds custom data tools and features to communicate this research. We're a team of front-end web developers that use Svelte, D3, and Mapbox to build these tools, but we also support the Urban Wire blog team that uses Datawrapper for communicating research insights. I'll be talking about this project today. This is a project where researchers at Urban were looking at immigrant families in North Carolina and looking at their demographics, since immigrants notoriously have a hard time accessing what we call safety net programs like medical assistance and nutrition assistance. The requirements for this application were to have a map showing population by county, along with lots of demographic information right below it. So things like, are there English proficient speakers in the household, the country of origin for immigrant families, things like that. We decided to use Datawrapper for this project to cut down time on developing a custom map in something like D3. So the technical setup for this, there's the Drupal CMS, shout out to our web development team, and then we iframe our Svelte application on the page. In the Svelte application, this is made up of a bunch of different components. The data wrapper iframe is in its own component, and then there are many information display components right below it. Now, the question that I'll be answering in this talk is, how does this happen? Thankfully, the data wrapper team has provided a number of chart interaction events for us to leverage from the data wrapper iframe. Using this browser API, the post message method, we can access different kinds of interaction events within our data wrapper chart. The team has also put together an events JavaScript file to make things easier. And what this looks like, after you've loaded the JavaScript on the page, you can add a listener for a specific type of event and then make use of that data in the browser. Now, you might be wondering, what is that event.data that comes back? Well, it's actually all the data that you've loaded into your data wrapper chart in the backend. Here, I've only provided a few pieces of information, and you'll see how more information gets loaded into the app later on. As far as the visualization events, the interaction events that are available, it's most click, mouse enter, and mouse leave events, although there are events for if you click on the social share button or the source and notes below your data wrapper chart. Great. So now that we know about interaction events in Datawrapper, let's talk about Svelte. This is by no means an introduction to Svelte or web development, but definitely encourage you to go Google. I'll give you a definition. I feel like the cool thing to do in conference talks these days is to ask ChatGPT for a definition. So Svelte is a modern JavaScript framework that compiles your code to highly efficient vanilla JavaScript during build time, unlike other frameworks that run in the browser. This is akin to like React. This approach results in smaller bundle sizes and better performance. And this is my favorite part down here. Svelte also uses a reactive programming model, allowing developers to write declarative code that reacts to changes in the underlying data. This is the special sauce of Svelte. A Svelte file or a component file looks something like this. First, you have the JavaScript section, your HTML, and your CSS. It's sort of like a mini application all in one file. And then for example's sake, I have here a component that has the title next to some visualization. What this might look like in a very basic example is our title and our data loaded in the script area using that $:, that's that special reactive syntax, as well as rendering out the those variables in the HTML section. Now, one of the best parts of Svelte here is that we can iterate through our data using this each block. This is really a declarative programming style where we're producing the information we want to be rendered on the DOM right in the code that we're building. If you're used to vanilla JavaScript or D3 and writing imperative code, this is a pretty different paradigm for creating web applications. All of this is compiled into JavaScript, HTML, and CSS at build time, and then you can deploy that to a server. If you want to build a full stack web application, you would do so with something like SvelteKit. The Datawrapper product is actually built on Svelte. All right, so what are the basics of sending a Datawrapper event to the Svelte app? This is our project once again. We're just going to be focusing on two main components, the Datawrapper iframe component, as well as one of the information display components. You could see that you would replicate the data display component again and again for the different sections. A little architecture here. Our app.svelte parent houses our two main components. And then we go, and every time there is an interaction event in Datawrapper, we set what's called a writable store. This is Svelte's secret sauce. This is the reactive store functionality of Svelte. This will house our selected county from the map. Then our current data, our readable store, will take in that county information and display all of the information that's in that external tooltip. And now you might be thinking, well, if it wasn't in the Datawrapper chart to begin with, where is it? Well, it's actually in a JSON file in the application itself. This JSON file looks something like this. Our primary key houses the unique identifier for the county alongside all the information we want to be displaying in our external tooltip. In our store file, we import our writable and derived store functionality from Svelte. Then we import our lookup data, that JSON. First, we export a writable to the rest of the application. That's that selected county. And then we export a derived read-only store. And the special part here is we're looking up in that JSON data that we imported, we're finding the relevant information based on our selected county store. For population.svelte file, one of the files that displays the data, here we're importing the readable store and as well as some helper functions. Now from here, it's just HTML all the way down, right? We're just creating some basic HTML here, but we have our reactive variable that's being imported and referenced and dynamically updating every time that read-only data comes through. Then in our iframe component, we're importing that events JavaScript that the Datawrapper team has provided, as well as the event dispatch functionality from Svelte. This is a way to expose events to the parent. In this case, we're exposing events to the app.svelte parent of the parent of this component. What that looks like is we first created an event dispatcher, and then we use that Datawrapper event listening functionality, in this case, region click, and we're dispatching a similarly named event to Svelte. Of course, at the end, we have to import our iframe. So that would be sort of everything you get from the Datawrapper interface, and you're used to importing into your web pages. Okay, cool. So let's bring it all together. First, we import the writable store. Then we import our two components, and we put them on the page. What I'll call out here is where we have our dispatched event, region click, where we're setting the writable store to that FIPS code. That's that unique identifier that we have in the North Carolina map. As soon as you do this, everything is now wired up and interactive. And so confetti time, right? Like this is it. This is really the core functionality of this application. So just some closing thoughts and resources. I sped through that pretty quickly. You would repeat this process for more data display components. We decided to add a dropdown for accessible navigation. In this application, you would bind that writable store to the dropdown. Some things to watch out for. You could pass all of that lookup data via the Datawrapper interaction event data, but be careful of bloat because you will increase the load time of your Datawrapper iframe if you keep adding more and more data to it. On the other hand, if you have a lot of data locally in your application, you might want to consider doing some fetch requests to an API or a database. And reminder that in this project, this is a one-way data flow. We're not controlling data wrapper visualization from outside the iframe. In the future, I'd love to experiment with the same approach, but with also a dropdown to switch between an active data wrapper map. Love to utilize the new data wrapper web component. And thanks to the Der Spiegel team, they talked about that patch method that they're experimenting with. So that's something I really want to check out. Definitely need to thank the project team, Brittany for creating all the wonderful designs in Figma, and Wes, the writer on this project. Thank you both. And Jenny Hamatal, the research team. The GitHub repository for this project is publicly available, but I've also created a workflow template for getting started here. This is actually a Svelte kit application that I am hoping sort of follows more best practices with JS doc type implementation as well as prettier. I think in the next few weeks, we have a Data Urban blog post coming out about this. This is our technology blog at the Urban Institute. And you can find me on LinkedIn or the Data Visualization Society Slack or the Unwrapped Slack for any questions that you might have. So yeah, I hope you get your hands dirty with some external tooltips in Svelte. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. I'm really excited to see this. I remember when we built these custom events, and we sort of did it out of a gut feeling that it would become useful someday to someone. And I'm really glad that it was useful. And just want to say, if there's any other like things in Datawrapper events that you want to get updates on, I don't know, because we didn't really have a like besides the obvious, someone clicks on a bar or someone hovers over something. Like if you have more ideas or anyone else, please share them with us. And we will add more events to see more of these custom uh, extensions of Datawrapper charts. So we have a bit time for questions. I've prepared one question that is like, I wonder if you have experienced or if you have tried out the web component embeds in Svelte, but you said that's something you will want to be exploring in the future.
Yeah, I'd like to see how this interaction event API works with the web components. In my initial testing, it was a little less straightforward than the iframe. I think just based on how Svelte renders web components in Svelte components, which I think it's just a little weird with rendering. So still more work to do there.
Yeah, and I guess we can also see if there's ways to use the direct contact with a web component embed as opposed to having this iframe in between. Something we will put on our radar as well. Raphael wants to try this in Vue as well. I guess it will work the same. What is?
Yeah. I've used React a bit. I could see it being relatively straightforward in React. Haven't used Vue a whole lot, but same thing. You're really following the same workflow here. You want to extract the event and assign that to a piece of reactive state in your application. So however you do that in the JavaScript framework of your choice, you can get to the same result.
Yeah. There is one question, I guess it's not to you from Natasha, but it's to the Datawrapper team. Any chances extending the same events to other map types? As I said, we are happy to add more of these events if they're useful. So I'm just going to say, reach out to the support team, support the Datawrapper, and tell us about like what you would love to, what sort of events, user events you would like to listen to, and we will see how we can fit it in. And there's a question from our from our development team. I can see where this is going. So Antonio asking, what made you pick Svelte over alternatives?
Yeah, so most of the time our data features feature custom visualizations. We find that Svelte is the best tool for creating data visualizations on the web. For the reasons I mentioned before, the declarative code paradigm is really exactly where it's at. Obviously, the data wrapper team agrees in using Svelte, but Yeah, and just keeping with the same paradigm, or using the same JavaScript for this application, we didn't want to go with a completely different technology, even for a project like this one where we weren't creating any custom visualization.
All right. Again, thanks so much for your talk.